The story begins with a father whose wealth could buy almost anything, yet could not quiet his deepest fear. His son, once full of life, now depended entirely on others after becoming paralyzed. Every morning, the millionaire left his grand home carrying a silent worry: what happens when I am not there? It wasn't suspicion that led him to install hidden cameras, but love mixed with helplessness. He had built empires by planning for every risk, and this was the greatest risk of all: his child's safety. Doctors, nurses, and caregivers came and went, but no resume could promise compassion. In a world where his son could not speak or move freely, the cameras became his eyes, his way of staying close when distance was unavoidable. They were not meant to invade privacy, but to guard dignity. Behind the luxury walls, this powerful man was simply a father afraid of failing the one person he loved most. And in trying to protect his son, he set in motion a discovery that would challenge everything he believed about trust, control, and the true meaning of care. As the days passed, the cameras captured more than routine care. They revealed a quiet truth about wealth and loneliness. The house was enormous, filled with marble floors, expensive art, and rooms that echoed even when full. The millionaire had built a life where comfort was guaranteed, yet warmth was strangely absent. His son had everything money could provide: advanced medical equipment, private specialists, the best therapists, but what he lacked was connection. Wealth had created a barrier, insulating them from the world while also isolating them from genuine human touch. Employees were polite, efficient, and professional, but always careful, always distant. The father began to see that money could hire presence, but not sincerity. It could demand time, but never devotion. In protecting his son with surveillance, he confronted an uncomfortable reality: power often replaces trust, and luxury can disguise emotional emptiness. The cameras reflected a life where control was mistaken for security, and abundance for care. Behind the success stories and public admiration, this family lived quietly alone, discovering that isolation is the one thing money multiplies instead of cures. And in that realization, the father understood that his greatest challenge was not protecting his son from harm, but protecting him from a life without human connection. With every new caregiver, the father felt the same quiet tension settle in his chest. Smiles were easy to perform, kindness easy to promise, but what happened when doors closed and no one was watching? The cameras were never meant to accuse, they were meant to reveal. Each screen became a silent test of character, capturing small moments that resumes never mention. Some caregivers followed instructions perfectly yet showed little patience. Others were gentle at first, then rushed through their duties once they thought no one would notice. The father watched closely, not as a millionaire, but as a parent searching for reassurance. He learned how fragile trust truly is when vulnerability is involved. His son could not complain, could not explain discomfort, could not defend himself. That responsibility fell entirely on unseen observers and unspoken ethics. The cameras did not create dishonesty, they exposed it. They showed how easily people change when accountability disappears. And yet, among these moments of doubt, the father continued watching, hoping to find proof that genuine care still existed. Because deep down, this was never about catching someone doing wrong, it was about finding someone who would do right, even when no one was watching. Then one ordinary afternoon, the screens showed something the father was not prepared for. The maid entered the room with no rush, no forced cheer, just a quiet presence. She spoke to the boy even though he could not respond, telling him about the weather, about her own children, about small moments that made the day feel human. She adjusted his blanket gently, not because it was required, but because she noticed his discomfort. When his hand slipped from the armrest, she held it for a moment longer than necessary, as if reminding him he was not alone. There was no audience, no reward, no expectation of praise. She stayed past her shift to finish a story she had started, laughing softly and wiping away tears he could not. The father watched, stunned, as care turned into compassion and duty transformed into love. This was not trained behavior, it was instinct. In a house ruled by schedules and salaries, she offered something priceless: presence. For the first time, the cameras did not feel like tools of protection, but witnesses to grace. And in that quiet room, the father realized he was seeing true humanity unfold. As he continued to watch, the father felt something shift within him. The cameras, once installed to give him control, now taught him humility. They had shown him procedures and routines, but they could never measure sincerity, until now. In witnessing the maid's quiet devotion, he understood that surveillance can observe behavior, but it cannot create character. Trust, he realized, is not built through constant watching, but through recognizing goodness when it appears. The cameras had not protected his son as much as they had protected the truth. They stripped away assumptions and revealed that the most powerful acts often happen in silence. The father began to question his own instincts to control every outcome, to manage love the way he managed business. Care is not a system, and compassion cannot be enforced. It must be chosen. In that moment, he understood that the greatest safeguard for his son was not technology or wealth, but the presence of someone who cared even when no one was looking. And with that realization, the father saw that sometimes the lesson is not about what we watch, but about what we finally learn to trust. In the end, the millionaire stood at a crossroads, no longer defined by his wealth, but by what he had learned. For years, he had believed success was measured in numbers, properties, and control, yet one simple act of kindness redefined everything. The maid owned very little, but she gave something far greater than money could ever buy. Through her, he discovered that richness is not about what we possess, but about what we offer when nothing is expected in return. His home, once filled with luxury and distance, now felt warmer because compassion had entered the room. The cameras that once symbolized fear and power became reminders of humility and gratitude. The father understood that his son's life would not be defined by paralysis, but by the love surrounding him. True wealth, he realized, lives in empathy, patience, and the courage to care deeply. And as he chose to honor that lesson, he finally understood that the greatest legacy he could leave his son was not fortune, but humanity.